there's a lot of people that believe things about Ukraine that just aren't true. And so here, what we want to do is we're responding, in this case, to a particular video, the Great Sean Ryan podcast. And he had on Andrew Bustamante, a CIA veteran.
Conflict and the pressure that the world's putting on Russia, it's not really about those two countries.
Welcome to Ukraine Bank.
I think we just gave another, 10 billion to Ukraine. I've lost count on how much money we've spent on them so far.
We've heard about all the money that's come to Ukraine, and total it's been allegedly over $100 billion. Having worked in Washington, I know when we hear numbers from Washington, that's not the actual number. And we've known for a long time, for example, that out of $15 billion of weapons that have come to Ukraine from the United States, that's not an actual price. It's a valuation of these weapons, many of which are very old. They're already paid for in the 80s and 90s. And then some of that money is money for the Pentagon to buy new weapons because they were sending, like, newer weapons were being sent to Poland, which Poland was buying. The old stuff was coming to Ukraine. And the Pentagon, like every year is buying new weapons anyway, and they just put it in the Ukraine package. And so we sort of knew that for a while. But then just last week, right after this podcast with Sean Ryan and Andrew Bustamante, the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, top Republican in Washington, he's an unusual Republican because he's critical of the Biden administration for not doing enough for Ukraine. And he said out of the $100 billion, 60% of that stays in America. It goes totally to American businesses, defense contractors, different programs. It never comes to Ukraine. Only 20% of it actually goes to the Ukrainian government. So the number is much, much less than we hear. The downside of that is it makes good Americans, who don't know the details. They're like, "Oh, I'm tired. I'm tired of this. Why are we doing it?"
The first thing I want to do is make sure that when you and I talk about Ukraine and Russia, we have to understand that we're actually talking about a much larger issue. What we're really talking about is Europe. That's how the United States and Russia and China and NATO, that's how they actually see the conflict. It's important to understand that the way that national leaders see a conflict is much more comprehensive than the way media portrays the conflict. Media portrays it as Ukraine and Russia because it's simple that way. The average American, and they're at a fifth grade reading level, who maybe didn't finish high school, right? They can get behind this idea of a war between Russia and Ukraine. But it takes a college education or even an advanced education to understand that the implications at a continental level, at a European versus American versus Russian and Chinese level. The whole idea of geopolitics is an advanced concept, right? Newspapers and media want to treat us all like we're idiots. So they have to talk to us like we're idiots. But the reason so many of us get frustrated is because we know we're not stupid. So don't talk to us like we're stupid. So Ukraine and Russia, the money that's going into Ukraine, the conflict and the pressure that the world's putting on Russia, it's not really about those two countries, right?
Wow. Well, the last thing you said, the pressure the world's putting on Russia, it's very skewed because it's actually Russia that's putting this pressure on the world. But I would say, as a starting point, I think every Ukrainian feels quite deeply that this is Russia attacking Ukraine first and foremost. If you're fighting in the trenches in Bakhmut, that's pretty clear. You're fighting the Russians.
First of all, Russians hate Ukrainians, and it's the main point. Because if you understand Russian, you can go to Russians' pages on Instagram, on Facebook, or in Russians' social media, Vkontakte, etc. And each time when some missile attack killing civilians, not just about soldiers. Okay, I understand why they're happy when it kills soldiers. Each time when it kills civilian kids, women, and something, they are happy and they want more and more and more. And this is the main idea of Russians, because they hate us because we are not the same that they want to. because Russian propaganda for maybe more than 100 years tried to make the image of Ukrainians like some silly rednecks, some kind of European rednecks in some old houses with horses, some crazy image of Cossacks, like alcoholics, like some just madmen, but not like a real nation. And each of our poets, each of our politics, each of our everything, our elite, was discriminated in some way. Most of our poets was killed by Russians in 19th century, in 20th century, and it's some kind of okay when you see that our poets had lived maybe for 30 years, and some way he was died, because it's this hate. It's not about 1 year, not about propaganda of Putin. It's about deeper layers.
Andrew Bustamante is right in that the world, okay, people get involved in the fight for different reasons, but the essence of it is Ukraine versus Russia. But what is that essence? And Russia is, and this goes back to the time of the czars, it's a horizontal society. And they have, I mean, they're so far away from any sense of agency of the regular people. They have this sense of you have the czar or the Putin or Stalin, and everyone else is below that. And Ukrainian mentality is completely, this is going back to the days of the Cossacks, the wild fields, the Dekapoli. They always were kind of anarchist, not in total anarchy, but in the sense that they wanted to be independent of the government and dependent on your family connections and your community. And that's, so you have, I think in this war, some of the most like horizontal, like fiercely free people versus like one of the most autocratic vertical nations.
I think it's more complicated than that. I think you're right. Yeah. So we can all be right at the same time on this because we're all right in different areas, different perspectives. So I think Andrew Bustamante's point was that this has geopolitical implications. There's a lot going on behind the scenes that is not portrayed in the media. And he's absolutely right about that. But that begs the question then and contradicts the point of why it contradicts the point that we shouldn't help Ukraine. If for no other reason than the fact that there are severe, I should say, geopolitical implications, i.e., I'm talking about China's involvement in all of this, then that is plenty of enough reason for us to be involved to make sure that they do not have hegemony over Europe. Because what this is about is having economic hegemony over Europe.